David in Las Vegas. Hey, David, you wanted to talk about something I just tweeted about just a second ago.
Hey, Tom. I just want to say that I think you are the smartest radio personality. The only other person that I've learned as much from a variety of topics is Noam Chomsky.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the air. I've learned so much from you.
Thanks. That's verified company.
I want to talk about a couple of things. One is that I'd like to urge you and your listeners to take a look at this report by Election Justice USA called Democracy Lost.
Yeah, I read it. I read it last week. Yeah, Lee Camp has been really pounding this over at RT, and I see Lee almost every day. His desk is over by where I go when I get set up for the show, and so we talk pretty much every day. And he told me about it, and I downloaded it and read it, and I think it's what it indicates for people who don't know what we're talking about is that there was apparently some very consequential and at least 6 different forms of it. Of election fraud that happened in the Democratic primary. They didn't look at the Republican primary, although what's interesting is that in those states with electronic voting machines, the exit polls for the Republican primary were consistent with the outcome of the machines, whereas the exit polls for the Democratic primary skewed toward Bernie, the exit polls, and the electronic voting machines skewed toward Hillary. Whether this was the activity of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, nobody knows. Or whether it was just, some weird thing or who knows what. But it's very troubling. And I think that there needs to be a serious investigation into it. Whether it flipped the election, the primary election, for Hillary instead of Bernie, we don't know, although Election Justice USA suggests that it's conceivable. This is... if this is happening in the primary, get ready for the general. I mean, this is like, bad, because if the Republicans were doing it, the argument is that back in 1968, I think it was, or maybe it was 72, I forget which year, but Richard Nixon was running for election, and Ed Muskie, the senator from Maine, was mounting a really serious challenge against Richard Nixon, and the polls clearly showed that Muskie would beat Nixon. And so Nixon didn't want to run against Ed Muskie, and instead he wanted to run against, I think it was George McGovern. So maybe this is the 72. I'm kind of blurry on who ran when in that time period, but I remember all these details. And so apparently Chuck Colson, from many of the reports that I've read, or at least one of his associates, went to Maine, and Ed Muskie got up on the back, and some reports have suggested that he spiked Ed Muskie's, or that somebody spiked Ed Muskie's coffee with LSD. And a couple of hours after drinking that cup of coffee, Ed Muskie has this campaign event. He gets up on the back of this flatbed truck with a microphone and starts just this meandering conversation about his wife and how she's been attacked by the Republicans, and he starts crying, and I mean, it was just a mess, and it was the end of the Muskie candidacy, and Nixon got to run against the person he wanted to run against. So the theory, the Republicans messed with the Democratic primary theory, is that the Republicans figured that they would have a harder time beating Bernie than Hillary. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But what I do know is that we need an affirmative right, R-I-G-H-T, a right to vote in this country, which we don't have. Bush v. Gore, that decision, when the Supreme Court stepped in and stopped the vote count in Florida, and by the way, stopping the vote count in Florida, of course, handed the election to George W. Bush, when it turns out that Al Gore actually won Florida. In Bush v. Gore, they come right out and say, Justice Rehnquist, in his decision, he came right out and said in the majority decision, there is no affirmative right to vote for President of the United States in the Constitution. And there should be. There should be, now over the years, we've gotten a couple of protected classes, specifically African Americans and women who have gotten a right to vote, and that protected class has provided some leverage now. The various courts have struck down these Republican voter suppression laws now in 3 states in the last couple of months, based on their impact on a protected class, specifically African Americans. But there should be an absolute right to vote for everyone in this country. And if it were a right to vote, then if there was election fraud, it would be a crime. And, and arguably it is, but, it's like nobody really does anything about it. And we've had these problems ever since 1998 when we started introducing these electronic voting machines. Mark Crispin Miller and others have brilliantly documented this stuff. Greg Palast, Harvey Wasserman, they've all done brilliant work and written great books on this. We need a constitutional amendment to say that there is an affirmative right to vote for all citizens, period. And I would try to write it in such a way that it includes, felons who have paid their debt back to society so that they can be reintegrated into society. But you're right, David. This is a serious issue and it deserves some attention. Thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.